Recording in progress.
Okay, good afternoon. Let's call the court back into session. I'd like to go to item E2A. Francis?
Yes, sir. So to start off with today, we have Ralph Wallace, our TCDRS representative with us today, and he's gonna cover some information about our plan and what the numbers look like into the future as well, so.
Okay. How are you, sir?
Good. Thank you all for having me. Just once again, for the record,
Recording in progress.
for the record, my
Okay,
name
good
is
afternoon.
Ralph Wallace.
Call the court back into session. I'd like to go to item E.
Sounds just like you, Judge.
How'd you do this?
Imposter.
It's amazing.
All right,
Everybody wants to be like me.
all right. We'll start over here. For the record, my name is Ralph Wallace, and I'm an employer services representative with the Texas County and District Retirement System. And I'd like to thank the court for having me here today. I think it's always important. I know it's been a while since I have presented to McLennan County Commissioners Court, and I know there's like a couple of new faces on the courts since I was here last time. So what I'd like to cover this afternoon is just give an overview of how the plan is structured, what the benefit levels are that the county is providing its employees, and what it is we look at every year when it comes to determining the cost to the county to provide those benefits. So with that being said, I think everybody has their packets. If you pull that colored presentation out of the right sleeve of your folder, and we'll just go ahead and start on page 2. And the retirement system, Texas County and District Retirement System, we're not structured like most public pensions in the state and country. We're a savings base or a cash based plan. And what I mean by that is when y'all hire somebody to come to work for the county, that individual starts contributing a percentage out of their paycheck. They're saving throughout their entire career. And as they're doing that, the county's putting away money to match those savings or those contributions that the employee is putting in throughout his or her career. So it's a savings or account-based plan. Most of your traditional public pensions, some of y'all might be familiar with, someone's benefit usually gets calculated based on years of service. They usually look at an average high salary toward the tail end of someone's career, and they use a multiplier, where this thing is just whatever you put into it throughout your career, that's what the county is going to match it by when you retire. And the next thing that makes us unique has to do with responsible plan funding. Generally, there's 3 sources of income that go into the retirement plan here at the county. You've got your employees contributing, counties contributing, and investment earnings plays a big role in that as well. We'll talk about that here in a moment. And one of the reasons we think that some of the retirement systems in the country are struggling is because the actuaries will take a look at their plans every year, and they'll come up with this minimum percentage of their payroll budget that they feel is adequate enough to keep that plan funded in a healthy manner for the foreseeable future. And what's happening is the employer's saying, well, I appreciate you telling me that, but we're not going to give you that. We're going to give you this. And that's one of the reasons why you hear about things such as being underfunded and unsustainable. Well, the way this is set up by state law, whatever the actuaries calculate each year as the recommended rate is also required. And that rate is designed so that if a county does have an unfunded liability, for example, and we'll talk about that here in a moment, that part of that rate goes to pay off that unfunded liability over a 20-year period. It's like a 20-year mortgage, so to speak, and that way it doesn't get passed off to the next generation of taxpayers and employees. So that's why it's set up the way it is. Pretty much makes us one of the most conservative in the country when it comes to making sure plans stay funded in a healthy manner. Moving over to the next page, and please stop me if anyone has any questions. Moving on over to the next page, We were started back in the late 60s by the Texas legislature. Since then, we have grown to over 330,000 members and retirees. I think we're up to about 819 different counties and districts that are in the plan right now. And if you were to add up all the monies that are coming in from all these individual plans, we're sitting at about $36 billion this year. McLennan County has its piece of that $36 billion. You know, Bell County has their piece of it, for example. And so sometimes I'll get a question, well, is the money I'm putting in here at McLennan going toward some other county's benefits? And the answer to that question is no, but we do pull it together for the economies of scale for investments. So another thing that gets looked at, and sometimes you'll hear about on the news, is how well funded retirement plans are. Well, I mentioned a while ago, we have about 819 employers, and most financial or most bond rating agencies these days, like Fitch or S&P, will tell you that plans like y'all's, if they're 80% funded or better, they're in pretty good shape. To the average funded ratio across the system is about 87%. McLennan County is right there. Y'all are at a little over 85% funded going into next year. So
That's the funds that are in there relative to the liability as people take retirement down if they're not gonna do it, but if they all took it at one time, you'd have 80.
yeah, Judge, it's basically, it's how much money the county has put away as it relates to the benefits its employees has earned up until this point in time. It's a snapshot right now.
Yeah, and so those benefits to them are liability to the fund.
I'm sorry?
Well, I'm assuming that, so the benefits that the employees have, and the fund is holding them, then it's a liability to the fund, but you've got 87% coverage on it, like, right?
Yeah, the average is 87%, and McLennan is sitting at about 85 right
Okay.
now. Yeah. And once again, as I mentioned a while ago, and we'll look at that cost to the county going into next year, part of that cost goes to paying down the rest of that over a 20-year period, and it's designed to get to 100% funded over 20 years.
Okay.
Moving over to page 4, I want to talk a little bit about investment returns. As everybody knows, last year was a challenging year because of the pandemic. The first part of the year, the markets struggled, and then third and fourth quarter, fortunately, things picked back up. Our investment philosophy is a long-haul investment philosophy. We know there's going to be up years and down years, but your average TCD member puts in about 18 years before they retire, and your average retiree is retired about 20 years. If you add those two numbers together, that's 38 years. Well, we have a 30-plus year investment horizon because of that, and up until this year, our long-term investment return assumption was 8%. It's being reduced to 7.5%, and we'll talk more about that here in a moment. But for the last 35 years, given the ups and downs, our average has been about 8.5% return. So it's doing what it's supposed to do. People ask me all the time, well, what's going to happen in the future? And I tell them, well, if I knew that, I wouldn't be sitting here. But it's designed to do what it's supposed to do. So it's a diverse portfolio. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. And moving over to page 5, this kind of gives y'all an idea over the last 20 years on a year-to-year basis what returns have been investment-wise. If you take a look, you've got a lot of like a gray shaded area sitting there, and the way our investment folks have the monies allocated in the portfolio, it's designed to where whether the year be up or down, it stays into that gray shaded risk band over the long haul. And what's interesting, with the exception of the 2008 recession, where we were minus 29, and then the 2009 bounce back where we were plus 26%, it's pretty much been staying in that risk band for the last 20 years. So once again, it's doing what it's supposed to do. Moving over to page 6, I want to get into some numbers on the county. Just to refresh and review the benefits here at the county, your employees deposit 5% out of their paycheck into the plan each month. If they retire, the county's promising to match $2.50 for every dollar the employee contributes, or a 250% match. The way they earn that right to retire is they got a vest, and so they got to put in 8 years to earn that right to retire. They're not necessarily eligible yet, but they've earned the right to retire. And there's 3 ways somebody becomes eligible to retire, and they only need to meet one of them, but they got to be vested. The first way is to be age 60. The second is what we call the Rule of 75, which just means your age plus your years of service has to equal 75. I bet some of y'all have heard of that. So if y'all have somebody that's been here, say 50 years, or that's 50 years old and they've been working here 25 years, you just add those numbers together to get you to that number. And the third way to become eligible is 30 years of service at any age. So, y'all could have somebody come to work for Road and Bridge at age 18, and they'd be eligible to retire at 48 if they were falling under that 30-year deal. Now, like I mentioned a while ago, though, this is a cash-based or a savings-based plan, so you can be eligible all you want to, but you may not be able to afford to retire when you become eligible. I'll give you myself as an example. I'm eligible next year, but I've got a kid about to go to college, and I got a mortgage I'm paying on. I'm not going anywhere. So, any questions on that? Moving over to page 7, some statistics on your employees and your retirees. Average age of folks here at the county is 43 years old. Average length of service is 10 years of service. Some good longevity there. As far as the folks that have already retired from the county, and as of the latest count, that's about 638 folks. They retired at age 61 after putting in about 19 years. And the average annual benefit is a little over $29,000. Now, remember what I said a while ago as we move over to page 8. These plans are designed to give an adequate benefit to a career employee, not somebody that comes here, puts in 10 years, and retires, because they're savings-based plans. What y'all are looking at on page 8, generally 3 sources of retirement income are going to be used by employees. They're going to have their TCD benefit, Social Security is going to play a role in this, and any personal retirement savings and investments, such as an IRA or a 401k from another employer. But when you add all these sources of income up, most financial planners will tell you these days you got to put away enough money while you work to be able to replace somewhere in the neighborhood of about 70 to 100% of your final salary to sustain you in retirement. Everybody's going to have a different situation. Some folks might still have a mortgage they're paying on. We know that health insurance isn't going to go away just because we retire. If anything, it's going to keep going up. And so those are things to think about. And what y'all are looking at there on that bar graph, based on the current benefit levels at McLennan County, shows after a certain number of years how much somebody can expect to replace their final salary by with their TCD benefits. So, that smallest bar, if somebody comes to work here, it puts in 10 years. Well, they're only replacing about 18% of their final salary. So this example shows this person hired at 55. So this is assuming this person probably worked somewhere else before they came to work for the county, and hopefully they have other retirement savings built up. But what y'all might want to consider as a career employee may be represented by those 2 larger bars on the right. Somebody that comes in here and puts in 25 years, for example, they're looking at replacing close to 60% of their final salary with their TCD benefit. As I mentioned a while ago, on average, folks retire from McLennan County after about 19 years, so they're in that 40% range. So if somebody, say, had a goal of 100% replacement, and they put in 20 years, they know that other 60% is going to have to come from Social Security or other retirement savings and investments. Does that make sense? Okay. Moving on over to page 9, let's talk about what it's costing the county to fund these benefits going into 2022. The rate that has been calculated actuarially is 13.19% of your budgeted payroll. And I kind of mentioned this a while ago. Part of your rate goes to pay down any liability you may have over 20 years. And, what affects liabilities? Well, whenever you do a benefit increase, whenever y'all vote to do like a COLA for retirees, for example, if you don't pay for that up front, that just adds to the debt, for example. Bad economies obviously play a role in it. Demographics can affect things. Payroll growth as well happens. But the other part of that rate goes toward funding the expected benefits that your employees earn out into the future. So it's actually 2 rates combined into one. If you look over on page 10, this kind of gives you all an idea of what your rate is this year and why it's going to where it's going next year. This year, the required rate for the county is 13.48% of payroll. Investments were about on last year. There was because of the rebound, so that didn't really impact one way or the other. Y'all had an actuarial gain, which means a reduction of the rate because of demographics. And I kind of looked a little deeper into that, and it looks like in 2020, because I'm going to back up here, what happens in 2020 affects 2022. It's always a year behind. Actuaries like to look at a full year of plan experience. But in 2020, based on what we know, y'all had some retirees or beneficiaries of retirees that passed away before their life expectancies. And so that gives you an idea of how that impacts demographics. And looks like y'all's payroll grew a little bit more than the actuaries thought last year as well. So that's what resulted in that minus 0.44 of a percentage point on the rate. The next section there that resulted of an increase of 0.13 has to do with what I was talking about a while ago. And let's move on over to the next page, 11. I mentioned a while ago that up until now, our long-term investment return assumption's been 8%, and that we've been doing about 8.5% for the last 30-plus years, 35. Well, based on what the actuaries and our investment folks are seeing for out into the future, their forecasts, they're expecting interest rates to remain low and investment returns aren't going to be as good as they have been in the past. And as a result of that, the decision was made to reduce that investment return assumption from 8% to 7.5%. And that's what caused that 0.13 on y'all's rate for next year. However, your demographic changes were enough to offset that. But 2 things we like to do to help offset years like that is, first of all, we have something called rate 5-year smooth, where any actuarial gain or any actuarial loss affects your rate, your employer rate, over 5 years. Either gradually goes up because of a loss or gradually goes down because of a gain. And it's designed that way to help keep rates stable for the county. The other thing that we have in place when we do better than expected on investments, our board of directors, who are made up of judges and commissioners from different places, they usually vote to allocate additional earnings in those good economic years to a reserve fund to help offset situations like this. And just so y'all know, going into next year, we knew the impact of that reduction of the investment return assumption was going to be a pretty good impact. They allocated $800 million to offset the impact of that. So,
On that page 10, you're saying that the current rate is what?
this year, the rate is 13.48% of your payroll budget.
All right, this year. And next year, you're projecting
It's going to drop down to 13.19.
1.9.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that's based on those assumptions and
Yeah, it-
Actual, okay.
exactly. I mean, you can see what impacts that rate one way or the other on that column right there. But yes, sir. So it's not just a cut and dried thing that gets looked at every year. You know, the different things factor in.
If your projected net return is greater than the 7.5, does that affect?
That'll positively affect everybody. Yes, sir. Okay, moving over to page 12. Ways for the county to keep its rates stable. I've already talked about a couple of them. You can just keep on doing what you're doing. There's always the option to adjust benefit levels. If you needed to as a county, you have that option and that control every year as a commissioner's court to do that. Some employers make an additional employer lump sum contribution to pay down the liability they have faster than that 20 years. It's like making an extra mortgage payment, so to speak. And then I have some counties that, instead of just paying the minimum required monthly rate, they opt to pay a higher monthly elected rate. And you have the option every year to change that if you wanted to. But that's there if the county ever wants to look into that. I'm going to stop here on this presentation. The rest of those slides are just for y'all to look at. If you would pull out the document in the other sleeve. And I think Francis knows this. The county's employer, TCDRS employer portal, there's a very strong and powerful tool in there called the Plan Customizer tool. And it allows each county to go in there and run what ifs. What if we did this? What if we did that? Based on the latest actuarial valuation. And, you know, if we did this, how much is it going to affect not only our employees, but what is it going to do to us in the long run cost-wise as a county? And if you would, just turn to page 3 entitled Plan Rate Projection. And so what the actuaries are calculating here is a 25-year projection of cost on McLennan County based on the latest actuarial valuation. So from what they're seeing, it looks like y'all's cost is just going to remain, and if y'all kept doing what you're doing, it's going to remain in that 13% of payroll range for the foreseeable future. Keep in mind, as this goes out further and further, it becomes more of an art for the actuaries, but this is what the highly educated guesses are saying right now. So, but that's pretty much all I have. Are there any questions on any of this that I can address? You've heard this before, Commissioner.
Yeah, but it always reminds me, it's good information.
If you go back to page 1 on the current plan detail,
Yes, sir.
is there a reason why we don't provide a partial lump sum payment at retirement? Is that just our choice?
It's optional to you, the county, and let me explain the way
Is our
that works.
liability affected?
Well, a little bit, and I'll explain why. First, let me explain how it works. It's only available at retirement, okay? And it allows an employee to withdraw any amount up to what they contributed, up to 100% of their contributions, but the matching money still gets annuitized as a monthly lifetime benefit. Not too many counties have it. I would say about 40, somewhere in the 40 range of counties. You know, the mindset's been different on this everywhere I've been. You know, I have some counties that are just afraid their folks, if they do that, they'll take out a big chunk of that money that was meant for retirement and do something crazy with it, and because it can impact obviously their monthly benefit because they're taking some of the money out of the pot that was going to be used to calculate that. As far as cost goes, you see a slight cost increase, but not a big cost increase on that, and the reason for that is when the annuitization happens, we are using an annuity purchase rate based on the full pot of money. Well, if the employee's taking out their money first, now it's going into the county's money that much quicker. And so you do see a little impact on that. In my experience, I haven't seen a big impact on costs in that situation, but there is an impact. And it's all, I mean, it could be completely, the impact could be different between y'all and, say, Bell County, and we can run those costs. And the other thing I want to mention on it is by state statute, once you adopt that partial lump sum distribution, you cannot rescind it.
Can't go back.
Yes, sir.
Ralph, isn't there some other stipulations on some of the other plan options where once you change to a level, you can't cut it?
Yeah.
What are the other?
Now, when it comes to matching in employee deposits, as a county, y'all have that option to raise or lower those every year. The eligibilities and vesting, once you lower those, it's another state statute deal. You can't raise them back up down the road. So
Which one's
I'm
that?
glad you asked that question.
Which one's that now you're saying you can't?
Okay, so if you go to, on that same page one, if you look at retirement eligibility section, so for example, the county currently has chosen an 8-year vest. If the county were to drop that to 5 years, they can't raise it back up to 8 years down the road. Same with the rule of, or any age with 30 years. You know, the other option for the county is to do any age at 25 years, or 20 years, I'm sorry. Same rule applies there.
Okay. But isn't there some vesting or eligibility to retirement based on other state annuity funds?
Yes, sir. It's called the Proportionate Service Program. If y'all hire an employee that worked for another, let's say another county,
Or ERS or TRS?
or they work for the state, ERS, or teacher retirement, then they share that time. Now, the monies stay separate, only the time gets shared, and it's a two-way street. So let's say somebody came to work for the county from Waco ISD, and I think they're in TRS.
They are.
They came to work for the county, and let's say they had 8 years over there at the school district. Well, they're walking in the door vested with y'all. They don't have any money in it yet. They need to put some money in the thing to get something out of it, but they're walking in the door vested. And it's a two-way street. The time they put in at McLennan, if they left their money alone in TRS, will go towards reaching TRS's eligibilities down the road. So in that scenario, somebody could end up retiring from two different retirement systems. But once again, the monies are kept separate. It's just time that gets shared.
Yeah.
I like that one, by the way.
Yeah.
I have a question on page 4 of our plan valuation, the projected, the unfunded liability, the 20-year payout. So that just keeps going out 20 years, or are we ticking away at that? How does that work?
Yeah, Commissioner, what?
We have not made we've not made I mean, we paid for our, we paid for our plan change last year and have added to the, added extra dollars in. So is this always a run in 20 years? Is this?
Well, based on the latest valuation, that unfunded liability you're looking at right now is designed to be paid off in 20 years. Now, that being said, let's say 2021 right now, there ends up being, well, I'll give you another example. Let's say the county had to cut a third of its workforce and a third of its payroll budget. Well, that's going to be probably another liability, but that liability, it's more layered rather than rolling. So whatever you got this year is getting paid off in 20 years. If there's a liability that occurs this time next year, that gets paid off in 20 years. Does that make sense?
And so anytime there's a retirement, there's a liability created. Is that?
I'm sorry?
Anytime there's a retirement, there's a liability created.
Well, what I mentioned a while ago, though, is the fact that it's an advanced savings plan. It's designed so that the money's there when somebody does retire rather than pay-as-you-go systems. But things, you do, like I said a while ago, what contributes to liabilities are things such as adopting COLAs for retirees and not funding them. Especially if you're doing it on a regular basis. You're stacking debt upon debt upon debt.
Right.
And I've gotten to the point where when I have a county call me about doing a COLA, instead of telling them what it's going to do to their rate, because they're basically paying off that amount for 15 years. Now, any benefit increase the county does that results in a liability, that gets paid off in 15. And so if a county doesn't pre-fund a COLA for retirees, for example, then they're on the hook for that COLA for 15 years. It gets rolled into their payments, so to speak. And if you've got a county that's doing these COLAs on a regular basis and not pre-funding them, they're just adding on to that. And so I've just gotten to the point to where when a county calls me, instead of telling them what it's going to do to their rate next year, we can calculate the cost and say, you know, that's going to cost you $2 million, and their eyes get this big. And I'm like, well, you got all these retirees and you're promising them a bump on their retirement check for the rest of their lives. And based on the demographics of those retirees, this is what we think it's going to cost.
But theoretically, based on what Will was saying, theoretically, if there were no changes for 20
If all the actuarial
for
assumptions
20
happen.
years- For 20 years,
Yeah.
nobody retired or
Right.
anything else happened,
If the-
then it would be paid off. in
If the world never changed,
Okay. Then it would be paid off, okay. Which we know is not gonna happen, but that's the
Right.
way it's, okay.
well, and it all comes down to, each county has their comfort level as to how well funded they want to be, because in theory, counties aren't supposed to close their doors, you know. But some counties are comfortable being funded at a certain percentage, some are comfortable being at a higher or lower percentage. You know, if a county wants to reduce its cost to fund retirement benefits, there's two ways it can be done. You either lower benefits or you contribute more money to pay off your liability faster than that 20 years that it takes to pay off with just that required rate. So,
Any questions? Okay,
all right.
appreciate you coming.
Now, one last thing.
Yeah.
The stats first.
Every year, the county has until December 15th if it needs to make any kind of changes.
Yeah, right. Good, thank you.
And I will probably see y'all at the North and East Texas Conference here in a
Good.
couple of weeks. I'll be at the table out in the exhibit hall.
All right, great.
All right.
Good to see you.
You bet. Good to see you all.
Good to see you.
Thank you, sir.
Uh-huh.
And so like you said, you know, we can use the calculator tool, and if there's any changes, that you want to look at and see how that affect your rate going forward, you know, let me know. I know Commissioner Perry asked yesterday about contributing additional funds.
A lump sum.
Lump sums. And so I have it out there on the workshop drive about, to put in another million, and this is on current payroll numbers, so not including if there was a COLA this year or any additional pensions. We're looking at about roughly right under $70,000, a drop in cost, for the next 20 years. So that's for an
70?
additional. Yes, right under 70,000 a year for contributing an additional $1 million this year. No other plan changes.
So $1 million would save you 400,000?
One point, yes,
Over a
yes,
period of 20 years.
correct,
All right.
correct. And of course, as you move up, you know, doubling that to 2 million or increasing it to 3 million, you know, we'll move up a little more each time there.
And one more thing I want to add to that is, you know, for example, this year y'all are sending us 13.48% of your payroll, and it's going down to 13.19. Well, if it's not going to be a resource issue and you're used to it, you can continue that 13.48 as well next year as a higher elected rate.
And that would influence that 20-year,
You could do a combination of both, you know.
yeah.
And it just depends on, once again, what I was saying a while ago, how comfortable y'all are with where you are right now in your funding of the plan and what it's costing you to fund it.
And we're at 87,
Y'all are at 85.2.
85.
85.
And what's the state average?
The average 87.
87.
Yeah.
Francis, if we, you put a deposit rate sheet on here.
Yes, sir.
So if we went from 5 to 7, would that restore back where we were in, before 2013 when we had to cut that?
Yes, so I know there's been some conversations about that in the past, and I already had that one pulled. But yes, if you were moving your deposit rate from 5 to 7%, and Haley's gonna pull this up too, so y'all can see it as well. But that increases your cost, like the next year by a little over $2 million. But yes, that would get us back to the plan detail that we had before that change was made. We moved down to 5%.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, look, 2014, it became effective.
Can you go to that first tab real quick, if you don't mind?
Yeah, and for a while there, the county was adopting COLAs for several years, from 1998 to 2010. And then, of course, the '08 recession hit, which didn't help things either, so.
You said it would cost 2 million to go from 5% to 7%?
Yes, and we could look at all different scenarios that you could plug in, but there was just that was just one scenario. It was moving from 5%, our current plan, to 7%, just a proposal of back to the 7%. So you'll see there on the bottom what those costs are estimated right now by TCDRS for the upcoming 20 years. And then that far right column, column H, is showing you the difference that it would cost you starting in 2022. And again, just using the same payroll number going forward, not just real simple, not even accounting for any increased cost, any increases in payroll. Just to have an idea.
Revisit that deposit rate, you mentioned 87 and 85. That's all 318,
Oh, you're talking about the
average, what,
funded ratio?
85 or 87%?
Yeah, the average across the system, and there's 817 employers, is about 87%.
Okay.
And as I mentioned a while ago, because people ask us all the time, what's a good funded ratio? Well, it depends on how you feel and how much you're funding it, but I mentioned the bond rating agencies like Fitch or S&P saying that if they're 80 or better, they're usually in pretty good shape.
And that takes into consideration all size entities that belong to it. I mean, there could be some very, very small entities that
Oh, yeah.
are funded 100% that may only have.
We have one employee entities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's an
And then
average.
you've got Harris County with about 13,000 employees.
Yeah, I would be curious as far as our size county or our grouping county from, 200 to 300,000, or any employer of that population, what their ratio would be.
In Central Texas?
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I mean, we could run those numbers for y'all, comparing, I mean, are you basing it on county population, county employee number?
Well, you could do it either way, that's true, yeah.
Because of course, another thing has to do with what their benefit levels are. You know, they,
Lot of variables.
Yeah,
Not,
yeah.
but I was just curious, what I would call a bigger county, if they're sitting at anything higher than 87 or higher than
Yeah.
80.
I could always run something and send it to Francis.
I would just be curious to see how we bump up against those people that we would consider our size.
I'll run something and send it over.
Kick me out of the chart.
But if you increase your employee rate from 5 to 7, and everybody gets a 2% COLA, you're basically, that's a wash. Nobody's getting a rate.
But guess, you know, it is hard sometimes for people, but the future advantage of that 2%.
I understand. It's hard to look at when you're on the bottom end looking up.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, as far as COLAs go, there are two types of COLAs that y'all can adopt for your folks. There's that flat percentage where you just tell everybody, don't care how long you've been retired, I'm just gonna give you all the same percentage. And that cap changes every year depending on what inflation did the previous year. So for example, in 2020, inflation didn't hit 1%. And so what our board normally does is they'll vote to round up or round down to set that maximum cap. So the maximum flat COLA would be 1% for 2022. The other COLA is based on Consumer Price Index, and it's designed to help the folks that have been retired longer by giving them a bigger bump depending on what inflation's done to their dollars over the years. So.
And so if that's something that they ever wanted to do again and do the COLA for the retirees, is that something we would just we would just need to contact you?
You and I could work on the phone with that customizer and determine, like I said a while ago, I've been in the habit since the '08 recession of telling my counties, if you can pay for these up front, do it. Don't add it to your debt. And we can help y'all calculate that if y'all ever do another COLA.
I have one more question. Do you have any counties that are, or plans that are 100% funded?
Yes, we do. We have some that are overfunded, actually. Not a bunch of them.
Counties? Counties?
I'd have to look at counties. It's more districts. You'll find, for example, there are some appraisal districts out there and smaller districts that are overfunded. I just talked to, I can't remember which county it was, that is actually overfunded. I talked to a couple of weeks ago. But they've been doing a monthly elected rate way over their minimum rate for years. And so they're probably over $1 million to the good, which is a great position to be in for an employer because it serves two purposes. It can either be used to fund a benefit like a COLA, or it can serve as a cushion for a rainy day year economically, so, to offset that.
Is that a county that's pumping oil right off their front porch?
Nope,
Okay, I was just wondering.
I can't remember where it was.
Natural gas?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure that one out.
Yeah. I don't think it was out in West Texas anywhere.
And so the whole plan is 87% funded, is that correct?
The average funded ratio across the entire system, if you took into account all the employers, is 87%. McLennan County is 85.
85, yeah.
Right.
And the bond rating, like to see you at 80 or above.
What they say, yeah.
Other questions? In his folder, he's got his business card and all, so
Yeah, feel free to call me,
call him anytime.
and then y'all come and say hello to me at the conference.
We will.
We will,
All right,
absolutely.
Thanks,
since
sir.
y'all are hosting it.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank y'all very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I can log in if you want to. I'll try to. Is the judge on? Is everybody still on? Is it just yours? All right. Is there any other conversation y'all want to have regarding retirement now, or just move on to something else?
Can
Well-
we move on to anything else right now? Or was that?
Yeah,
Is that the agenda item?
Well, I think it's
open-ended.
overall budget.
Budget.
Was
Yeah.
it budget? Okay.
Yeah, we can move on. We can do some more work.
Okay.
But, you know, be thinking about as we get down towards the end, how we allocate any funding, especially where we're, our unassigned fund balance being as high as it is, and hopefully, you know, if we do like we normally do, come under budget on this year, there'd be some funds available that if we want to consider paying down some more of that debt, then, you know what the return is. So for every $1 million, it's $70,000 down for that year, for a year. But it eliminates that debt for what's now sitting at 20. And the other thing is the fact that our return on our cash is really low. You know, market rates on money is really cheap.
Not making anything.
So, looking at that relative to the cost of return or the return on cash might be a good investment.
And, as he mentioned, plan changes for the next year are due mid-December, but we always make sure, that we know what y'all are wanting at this time of year so that we can
Right.
budget for it, of course. So it's always something we try to get a good decision from y'all on before the end of August. And, he mentioned our rate dropping to that 13.919% this year, and that's reflected in the budget numbers that we started looking at yesterday. Okay.
Okay?
So if y'all are good for a little bit longer today, we can start going through some departments.
It's 2:16, so why don't we go to round 3 if everybody wants to?
That sounds good. So we'll try to go through some that, I say easy, just some small changes in some departments. Tomorrow we have some heavier requesters of departments. So those being Sheriff's Office, and they'll come in and explain their requests for next year, as well as IT, and they'll go through IT assessments and some other things for next year.
Okay.
And then we'll try to fill in some gaps with some other departments that have some requests. You just told me. We'll pull up the general fund workshop here in just a sec. But the general fund workbook is on the budget drive. And this is the same thing that we were looking at yesterday, of course. Bear with us. What should not get in the budget workshop drive? Or is it just the whole internet? I'm sorry.
Would my numbers be correct that if we paid that down $1 million and our return is 70,000 a year, it'd be about 14 years before we hit a break even?
Correct.
See a return on it? Okay.
Well, I mean, the way I see that calculated, every year there's more liability. I mean,
We add liability every year when we, yeah,
somebody retires or something like that.
exactly.
How many years in a row have we paid on that?
So we did not pay
Didn't pay last year.
last year. Give me a second, I can pull that up.
Thank you. Don't ask me to read that.
Tried to make it bigger.
Thank you, Mayor.
Almost there. Okay, to answer the question about the contributions, the additional contributions we've made to TCDRS, in 2016, $2 million, 2017, $3 million, 2018, $2 million, 2019, $2 million, and then we did not budget any contributions in 2020 or 2021. So 2019 was the last time that we contributed $2 million. So we did it 4 years in a row.
Maybe looking at it a different way, instead of worrying every year, can we, how much? Why don't we just take the rate from this past year or the year before, which would be a higher rate than we're at now, and just pay that going forward? Not take advantage of the rate dropping, just continuing to pay what the rate was.
That
and then you-
13.9 instead
Whatever
of
it is, and then-
13.1.
Right.
13.48, and that's
Yeah,
our
48.
current rate this year. So instead of, yes,
But-
budgeting for that drop, keeping it there, which you said, some counties do that,
Yeah.
and instead of making a lump sum payment. But, any year that we needed to, you could
Right.
come in there and actually take advantage of that drop in the rate.
Maybe look at, what does a 14% rate look like? Are we comfortable? And then just implement that instead of worrying, can we come up with $1 million or $2 million, or what do we put here or there? Just,
I guess, it'd be depending on what the dollar cost for that budget year, because, we've been pretty fortunate the last several years to be able to make a decision whether we want to do a lump sum or not. But if we put it into the rate, then we're locked into it.
but we're not locked.
Not locked in.
We can always go back to the rate that they would recommend.
Yeah.
Each year, they
Oh.
will calculate what we have to put in, and then we can always go above it, like he's saying.
But it's
I like that idea.
it's an amount you've been paying, so it's
Yeah.
somewhat baked into your budget.
Plug it into the budget and see what it looks like. Yeah.
And so, like right now, roughly our payroll, our total payroll that we pay retirement on is right under 57 million. So, just 1% of that is 568,000. So when you think of paying even a 0.5% or 1/4% more than we should, that would be roughly, your cost per year, instead of making those lump sum payments.
I like
How do you have it calculated right now in the 22 worksheets?
So in that worksheet, we have it dropping to the recommended 13.19%.
Okay.
And it changes January 1st. So when you look at the budget, you've got 3 months, October, November, December, of the current rate, and then 9 months of that lower rate.
Right.
So if we pay a higher rate, we're not affecting the liability side, we're affecting the asset side. We're increasing the asset side, right? I don't know that it makes any difference, but
Yeah.
you're building, on the positive side, you're building that fund, but you're not doing anything to the liability side, but yet your debt to worth is gonna be improving, so.
Yes,
You-
yes.
You would be on the liability side, wouldn't you? Because that percentage is inclusive of what you need to pay the liability down. It's already cooked into the percentage, or you would never have your
So that
liability.
rate would pay, elevated, let's say you went from 13.5 to 14, then you would be, what you're saying is you would be paying your debt service at a higher rate,
Right,
and so therefore it is dropping the
right.
liability.
So there's a certain percentage that's needed
Paying your
just
debt
to.
rate faster, down faster.
On that that plan detail, like halfway down, it shows you the breakdown of that rate. There's the normal rate, normal cost rate, and then the liability rate. So like you said, I imagine that maybe that additional would go straight to the liability rate. But we can verify, I'll verify with them that that's how it's, that's how
Okay,
it
well,
runs.
yep.
We'll run some numbers on some of those thoughts, and then
Okay.
we'll come back to that. And so then, getting back to general fund, and I know we'll have some time here to get through some of this. We wanna kind of hone in now on the department expenditures. So as you remember from yesterday, the department expenditures we were looking at there were right over 128 million. So that included all department operating requests, no personnel, but just operating, as well as capital outlay, vehicles and equipment. So Haley passed out a listing, it's the blue shaded chart, and it just pretty much goes through every line that there was an increase to, and gives you just a brief reason, which we will go through these as well. But then all of these, of course, are contained within each of these sheets within this workbook as well. So we just wanted to compile it just to kind of give you at a glance the changes that we'll cover. So I think we'll just dig in and start with the first department on our list. Let me back up one more second. So departments that had no change in operating, or they actually decreased lines. Are y'all good with us just saying we have reviewed, they seem reasonable, there's nothing out of the ordinary? Do y'all want to go through those in a workshop? Or are y'all good with us? That's kind of how we've proceeded in the past, but I just wanted to make sure that was still an okay way to.
I think it is, unless
Okay.
y'all see something that it's not increased, but it's, an example would be, they had no need for this expense anymore, but yet they kept it in there
Yes.
when they could have actually pulled it down and lowered it. So I guess if y'all think y'all would see those kind of things, and it's not necessary for us to do it.
Okay, and we've noted things like that here and there, so we'll definitely bring anything to your
Okay.
attention that we.
Or
feel needs to be.
alarmingly less, and they left something out.
And when we go through or Haley goes through the request to begin with, we kind of keep an eye for things like that. Like, have they had to already do budget amendments this year? We don't want to get ourselves into that situation again, so we have made adjustments here and there for that. Okay, well, we will start with Department 0010, and if you follow along in the workbook, the tabs are just numbered in chronological order of department number, and there's a tab for each. Operating and personnel budget, and then a corresponding tab for their personnel. So 0010 is our commissioner's court budget. You'll see there that the yellow highlighted cell for repair and maintenance, and that is a maintenance contract on the civic clerk agenda software. And so that is needed there to upkeep our agenda building software. So as we go through these, if y'all are okay with them, we'll just keep going through. Please stop me if y'all have any holdbacks on any of these. So that's the only change operating wise in that department.
Okay.
Okay, moving to Department 0020. This is the County Judge's Department. This is an example of one, and again, we just wanted to just make everything as transparent as possible and not skip over anything. There were changes made to this budget, decreasing furniture and equipment and increasing other services and charges. But the department was able to do that and keep their operating budget net zero change. So you'll see there that the operating budget is still a total of $146,000. So if y'all are
Okay.
good with that, we'll keep moving on. Moving forward, county clerk, no change at all. Our next department is 0070, Human Resources. So a couple things to note here. One is at the top, and I kept saying we were just gonna look at operating, but this is in the personnel section. It's the line that's titled temporary full-time pay. This is our internship program that began this year. So if you wanted to continue that program, of course, and budget for it next year, that $24,000 there would be the amount that would be needed to continue that into the next year.
Which department are we in now?
So this is Human Resources,
Okay.
and we have all of the internship program costs housed in Human Resources,
Okay.
keeping them together instead of having them in each department that they're working in.
Do you remember how many interns that would be?
3 or 4?
I think there's more than.
We added,
Sure.
Veterans?
I think there's one in HR, isn't there, or something?
Yeah, one of them's HR, one's veteran service officer, and one or two for y'all. One, that's 3.
Was there one down in Human, Health and Human Service?
Yeah, Health and Human Services.
I think I think
Well,
they-
that's, actually, that one's in this year's budget,
Oh,
because she's leaving, didn't she say?
Couple months.
Yeah. But I don't know, maybe there is 4.
maybe got another.
So,
That 4 is correct, if you guys can hear me. This
Yeah.
is Anna. 4 is correct, and it's Health Services, HR, the Auditor's Office, and Veteran Services.
okay.
Okay,
Thank you, Anna.
You're welcome.
I mean, I think we ought to go a few years with this, see how it works, because, one of besides the research or things that, whatever they're assigned to do, as long as they're in departments that are working to, have them productive and get some benefit out of it. The other piece of it is, every once in a while, we're gonna run across someone that we're gonna wanna keep. And there'll be an opening and we match them up and, those kind of things. So, I'd like to see us continue this for at least going another year.
We've been very, very pleased with having the help in our office. She's actually done a lot of work on helping with the budget.
Good, good.
We don't want to let her go.
But you
Okay.
found somebody else that likes numbers? Okay, okay.
And Francis, this sheet right here is just operating, though. It has,
That's total.
It's total?
That is total. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So sometimes when you look at the total change in a department, in ones that had no change, you'll see a drop because of the change in retirement and things like that. And so, so that one you are holding up, that is everything. That's
Okay.
all personnel operating in one department.
gotcha.
So there, and then there was an increase in the repair and maintenance line of $600 there. So that were the changes, and you'll see there again, like when you look at this department, there is a large drop in the operating budget, and that's because of the employee vaccinations line. So they have done a lot of work in I know getting that program ramped up. So their estimate is that they will need 100,000 this next year. So. If there's not any other questions, we'll move on.
Okay, move forward.
Our next department is our telephone department. There's actually a decrease in this department because they have completed their replacement of the phones. They were on a 2-year program that replaced all the telephones, so.
Okay.
Maintenance of buildings is Department 0110. There's a group of changes there. All of the things in yellow he has adjusted. He's been able to make those changes and then still keep his budget fairly constant. You'll see there's just like a $300 difference from one year to the next. But there is some increases just for the cost of supplies and things that he needs related to COVID. A lot of those costs have increased. He's also requested some increases for furniture and equipment, other services and charges, and then just the repair and maintenance line item, just due to the fact that he's had to continuously do budget amendments in these line items. Some of these things are hard to predict, you know, how many things they're gonna have to repair and replace during the year. So he's made some adjustments to those lines.
Is this the area that we will add to when we build our courtrooms?
Yes, it could be, and that's a good question, because as we accommodate for more courtrooms, whether it's short-term or long-term, some of that expense is gonna be capital improvement, of course, but there's gonna be odds and ends. I mean, we're gonna have to have probably one, or at least one temporary courtroom. So, but once we buy that furniture, if it is purchased in maintenance, then it could be moved and reused at another location. But
Yes, sir.
we're gonna try to get all those big costs like that under bond, long-term finance deal.
Thank you.
Yeah, and in the maintenance and building department, it houses like ongoing repairs and maintenance of things to make things whole again, to get them back in running order the way they were. Also things that don't really add to the life of buildings or to the value of buildings in a big way. Like
Right.
carpet, replacing carpet,
Right.
this items like that. But when you do get into larger items that do add to the value or the makeup of a facility, then that's when we get into permanent improvement, and those would be housed in your permanent improvement funds, whether that be the ad valorem funded permanent improvement or
Or
a
bond,
bond funded
yeah.
permanent improvement
Right.
fund.
Thank you.
So he has made some adjustments there. There is also additional cost, janitorial service cost, again, just due to increased cleaning due to COVID. And then he made a change in professional development in order to fill vacant positions. He needs to provide training to get those new people coming in and trained and ready to begin the new position. So, but he's been able, like you can see, to make all of those adjustments and still keep almost identical operating budget there.
Okay, any questions on that one? At least for right now, we're good. Okay.
Next, 0120, maintenance of equipment. This falls under the sheriff's office umbrella, so we'll touch on those tomorrow when they join us.
Okay.
Department 0130 is our engineering department. And engineering had no change in their budget from the prior year for operating. Let's see. Next will be Department 0190. And this is, what we were always referred to as the countywide department. So there's various items that are housed here that don't just apply just to one department, but or like it says, countywide. Here is where we house the amount for incentive pay. So I know when Anna joins us next week, that may be a conversation you want to talk about, the future of that program and how you would like that to work next year. But for now, what we've plugged in is the same 2% per personnel dollar there. The same with the bilingual pay program. If you, of course, choose to continue on with that program, that amount is there.
What was that? What program?
The bilingual pay program.
Oh,
So those are just plugged in just as if you want to continue with those as they normally are. We also have holiday payout budgeted here. And sometimes that's just something that's hard to budget for. But we're just looking at the trend for the last couple of years. That number is housed there.
What is holiday payout?
This has changed recently in the last couple years, but it used to be that if you worked a holiday, and you did not take that holiday within that same pay period, the holiday just kind of rolled out there, and you had so long to take advantage of that. it's very cumbersome to try to keep up with those days in addition to other accrual leaves. So what happens now is if you do work a holiday in a pay period, it'll either run into your vacation, or if your vacation is maxed out, it's paid out on the next check. So that's what's accounting for those. And so, we have some very large departments that lots of people work on the holidays. And so they're at a max level where that's not rolling into vacation. It's being paid out.
I thought we talked about that we would try to encourage the Department head elected official to encourage like a day off on a regular day. Comp day, thank you.
Well, and I think that,
It's a
law
non-cash.
enforcement and our correctional facility departments, it's just been difficult for them to do that.
Okay.
And
So that's
we could
primarily
ask
where
them
it is.
about that,
Primarily,
yes,
that's
tomorrow.
law enforcement then, and not other departments.
It is, from time to time, there is some, but for the majority of it is going to be your jail,
I
sheriff,
understand, yeah.
juvenile,
Sure. Okay.
yes.
And so if they retire or whatever and they have a balance, we have to pay for that, right?
Yes, if it's sitting in their vacation or their comp time, then yes, we would pay
That's
that.
something else, that's a point I'd like to talk about, is comp time. I know it's not, and now's not the time, and that's fine, but just, we have
I agree.
like $200,000 worth of liability of comp time, it looks like to me, that which I know we have a policy that it has to be used before we can hire someone, but if you made an exception every time somebody retires and went ahead and hired, you'd have, it looks like to me, over $200,000 worth of liability there, payout.
Yes, so whenever you make an exception to that, where before that leave time is exhausted, you're hiring in, yes, their budget can cover it, but you are, in a way, covering a period of that time for accrual time plus the new
Double
position.
pay somehow,
Yes.
to the tune of about
It's a double cost, but.
200,000.
Yeah, the problem is if that person, leaves and there's nobody filling that desk, and it's a high, very important,
I
and
understand.
that's why we had to do it, but it always needs good questioning around, the logic
Yeah,
on it.
I looked at some of those comp hours, they're pretty, some people are pretty high, number-wise.
Yeah.
Well up there.
Yeah, and mostly law enforcement again, just because it's so, they tend to struggle.
Something to look at, I think.
Yeah.
Okay?
And in some of those cases, it's been on the books for years, so there's no telling how much they were making when they earned it, and now when they use it, it's at a much higher rate. So it wouldn't hurt to revisit that. We've done it before, and it's just a frustrating fact.
We will come back when y'all are ready. We'll
That's fine.
Pull
That can be a
whatever's
later visit, so.
Yeah.
And then also, our workers' comp and our unemployment insurance costs are here, as well as our retiree group health insurance premiums. So, a lot of big things budgeted there, but just they all fall in this countywide department. And then, looking at the bottom section of that department, we go through, and adjust as needed, based on contracts we have and trends. Utilities are housed there, our bank service charges, our insurances. And so, we've made, some adjustments there. The one that is, highlighted in the orange color, that's the amount that we contribute to the appraisal district, for their budget each year. And we do not have, I believe, a set number there yet, but we have it there so we can come back to that when we have that information. One other line item to note, is the contingencies line item, the very, very bottom line. Last year, we budgeted 1.375 million in there. This year, and I know there were some reasons why we bumped that up a little last year. This year, we just kept it at the 1.25 million. So if there's any thoughts there that y'all want to increase that or decrease that, let me know. But I think that I think that that's a good number there to have through the year.
Based on what information, how did you base that, come up with that?
I think as a percentage of the budget, I think it's a pretty low amount, so I think,
Okay.
I don't think we'd want to go below that number.
Okay.
But actually historically, we've kept within 1 million to 1.25 million each year, has been sufficient for contingencies, for things that just come up that were unplanned for during the year. We can always move from any line, but that's the line we go to when something comes up unexpected.
So it's your experience and professional opinion that it should be that amount?
Yes.
That's good
yes.
enough for me.
Yes, yes. And I know sometimes, there's some things upcoming. I know, our district clerk, when we get to his, he has some thoughts that, we don't know how long using the base is gonna play out. There's some things like that
Right.
it's hard to predict for next year. So once we get into that conversation, if there's some costs we're just unsure of, we may wanna bulk up that number a little bit for those things.
Okay.
But right now, I think we're good.
Postage is $100.
So, the postage line, here, postage is bought through this line. It's then, and this is our main postage meter here in the courthouse. Lots of departments use the postage meter. At the end of the month, we spread those costs to the actual departments that incurred those costs. So there's the cost that's there, it's just, there so that there is something for it to hit. And we usually do have some countywide postage that stays here. It is a small amount, but that's what's occurring there. So a lot of postage runs through the postage meter, here in the building, but it just gets cost out to each department. Yes, sir. We bumped up the utilities line a little, and that was just based on some trends that we saw, looking at the last few years. And then we also bumped up the autopsies line item. And sometimes when you look at these line items compared to the last year, we had to kind of go back and make sure that we were looking at years other than 2021 to see what we think will happen this year. So that is why we increased those slightly. But overall, this department, we're looking at a slight drop in total of about $100,000. So moving past that department, the next one's 0210, and this is our criminal district attorney. There were no requested changes to their operating budget. Department 0410 is elections. They requested an increase to postage due to just a greater trend in voting by mail. There was a slight increase in software licensing, and that is just because of an increase in the VOTEC and Hart InterCivic software licensing cost. And then voter registration certificates, it's a year for that cost to be. So we didn't have it last year, but this will be a year that they need to have those printed.
And I guess the legislature could, on the voting bill, some decisions they make could affect this postage and shipment on ballots, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Either way.
And
The big expense is the dual machines, and we're already looking at that
right.
issue.
And we'd probably put that in a bond, I guess, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We've already pulled it from them.
Right, that's right, yeah.
But yeah, those, there, like you said, there could be some adjustments after that new equipment is decided upon. that may-
And I don't know if it's a big deal or not, but these new voting machines, no matter which one you choose, has a paper backup. It has to be a special kind of paper and all this kind of business, and so I'm just wondering if that's a big cost or not a big cost, I don't know, but that'd be a good question for Jared, I guess.
Yes, do you want us to go ahead and plan to have him come in? I know you may not want to use general fund funds for the purchase, but have him discuss that in the next week or so.
Yeah, and because I wanna get, kinda logistically, his opinion on this equipment, when we get it and when we use it. It could be that we choose to get it earlier, we'd have to range for storage, cause we still have the other equipment. And then, we don't have to wait for a back order or something, we're getting to election time. So we just need to think about all the things that could put
Right.
us in
Exactly.
risk. So,
And storage is gonna be a big deal,
yeah, cause they,
especially while we still have these others.
yeah, takes up a lot of room, yeah. Okay,
Okay, well, we'll schedule and have him come to speak on that equipment.
all right.
Soon. Department 0550, is our purchasing department. They are requesting, an increase in furniture and equipment in order to buy a copier. It's a Canon Image Runner copier. It does not exceed $5,000. We're frozen here, so it'll be up on the screen shortly.
Okay,
But they are requesting to purchase a copier. It's, I think, a little less than $4,000, so that's housed in their furniture and equipment.
yeah,
They're requesting an increase of $250 in repair and maintenance for the maintenance cost associated with that copier. They're requesting $200 of an increase to travel reimbursement, and it's just due to the miles that they're traveling, going back and forth with surplus to the Cobb's facility. So
Right.
it's a little bit further that they're having to go. And then also a $2,000 increase to professional development. And so, of course, our purchasing director needs continuing education hours, but he'd also like to send his new employee to some training. And then for the position that they have open, they would like to hire a contract administrator, and that will require a certification that will also require continuing education hours.
okay,
So, in total, we're looking at $6,208 in increased cost from last year.
okay, this is a little bit different subject, but it has to do with purchasing, and Commissioner Jones and I were talking the other day about, the wide range of cost of these, printer copy machines and all this stuff. And
Yes,
so I'm just, I think we'd like to have an explanation on how, if an elected official, let's say, orders a, beefed up, copy machine.
A $13,000 copy machine?
yes.
Yeah, or more.
So we, with Ken as well, we've
And then-
been doing some research on that copier that we discussed yesterday.
Yeah.
And they, you will see there are different amounts because they do have different capabilities, but some of them do seem a lot higher than others.
Well, I mean, they need, the tools to do their job, but they don't need to be overtooled. We don't need to be pulling a one-horse trailer with a Kenworth truck, so, afraid that's what we're doing in some of these areas, so.
And, and when things come through, we always, things like buying copiers through CTWP or, of course, there's maintenance agreements usually with them, so those are required to come through you. And we always, to try to make sure that purchasing is involved and knows, what's going on with those quotes and those purchases, so.
And we don't have any type of, and all of those are purchased, they're not leased, they're not on a lease. They're all purchased with a maintenance contract instead of leased with a maintenance
They
contract?
can.
Yes.
Because
do either
when you
one.
finish with one,
Uh-huh.
with the life of one, what do you do with it?
It's usually surplus and goes to the auction usually if it's just, you know,
You can,
if there's too
And
many
on-
issues with it.
but it's
Sometimes on a lease, they do a replacement.
they'll do a replacement deal with you
I-
on a lease.
I'll check. I believe we may just have just a small handful of ones that are maybe on a lease.
I'm just wondering which is more cost
think-
effective.
Right, and Ken knows that pretty
Yes.
well,
Yeah.
what is most effective.
The ones recently, we have been just purchasing them outright.
And so there,
Maintenance
it seems to me like there was a change in the terms at some point in the leases, and it's not as, it's by the page or something like that they were charging us on the leases.
Right, that's a common way to do it. I don't know that you
And-
have to do it that way.
It got, I think we determined that purchasing with a maintenance contract is it's more cost effective. But, it's been a while since we've had that discussion.
Be good to look at it again.
Definitely.
And I have a question about the Cobb's building, and, we can talk about that offline or whatever, but, is that storage area, is it air conditioned? Did we go ahead and air condition that?
Which
Or
area?
the-
For what?
The Cobb's
Storage
building,
out
it's the
of
building
Cobb's.
we've got on Cobb's. Dustin knows.
Garage part, no, sir. It is not air conditioned.
No, he-
Okay.
I
No,
think
no, he's talking about behind the offices,
where the loading dock is.
between,
Yeah, the loading dock,
between the,
Yeah,
where Texas
right.
Agri-Knife is and the back door.
not the garage.
The back part is not air conditioned. Only the agri-lot portion is.
Right, and
Only the finished offices.
Yes, sir.
but when we put the server in there, we will have to air condition where the servers are. It's part of the estimated cost.
And I guess we can talk about that project at another time too. So.
All right, what else?
Okay. So any other questions or comments there on purchasing? Or do y'all
That's fine.
all proceed? Yes, let's,
It's almost 3, so wherever you want.
it is, let's see if we can look at one more. There's some of these that we already have people scheduled to come in, some of our larger departments or groupings of departments. We do have, and since Dustin's still on, he might could help give some background on this, but Department 1270, that is our mental health court services department.
Wow.
And we have some increases there, and it is really due to an increase in the caseload
Right.
there. There's an increase in other services and charges, psychological services, the court master's line item, and then the court appointed attorneys. Like I said, there is an increase in caseload, and Dustin, do you want to lend any other information to that?
Sure thing. As Francis said, it's really lends to the increase in caseload, just the sheer number of cases, and we tried to match up next year's budget with projected expenses for this year, and knowing that those could even potentially increase beyond that. And something new that started are the forced medication hearings, and so that's where that psychiatric and psychological services line item comes from. And so that's our best estimate for what a year of that could look like, but that is a new upstart, and we've only handled, I guess, a handful of those so far. So this is just one of those budgets we'll need to, monitor closely as we kind of step forward into next year.
Definitely, and we're already, like you said, we're already seeing, one of the lines we've already had, or two of the lines we've already had to do budget amendments in this year, so we're already seeing those increased costs.
Uptick, yeah.
There.
Is that outsourced, Dustin?
The
Like, yeah,
yes, sir. There's a psychiatrist that does those
Okay.
proceedings. Yes, sir.
great.
Plus, we have to hire an ad litem and other costs just like a regular court.
And so, any other thoughts on that department? We can close that one, and then if y'all are ready to end for the day, then
Okay. All right, any questions? All right, any of these we can come back to if we need to, and other questions, and then, let's see. Also in your drive there is a calendar, that people continue to look at the calendar and see what's next.
And so tomorrow, like I said, sheriff's office, IT tomorrow, and then hopefully we can get through a lot more of these smaller departments, and just get a lot of that hashed out before this week is out. So,
Okay.
9 o'clock in the morning?
yes, sir.
And Francis, we do have that H9 on the agenda for the various county policies and procedures. There's no discussion needed on it right now, right?
No, we can come back to those here in the maybe next week. And so that's looking at our fund balance policy and just adopting that and finalizing that, as well as, we talked earlier in June about a mission statement and our organizational goals and having something in written form there. So yes, we can come back to those, Destin.
Good deal. So we'll just keep that on the agenda then.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, anything else to come before the court? So tomorrow will be new posting. And so we will, if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn this meeting.